The glass of whiskey sat abandoned on the cold marble floor. The ice had melted. The amber liquid was still. And Dong Jun, the most powerful man in Manhattan's underground empire, was on his knees. His three-piece charcoal suit, tailored in Milan and worth more than most people made in a month, was wrinkled against the floor. His hands trembled as he reached forward toward the scene unfolding in front of him. Behind him, 3 of his men stood frozen in the doorway. None of them moved. None of them spoke, because none of them understood what they were seeing. In the center of his penthouse living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, was a young black woman in a simple gray maid's uniform with a white collar. Her name was Journey Williams. She had been working in his home for exactly 22 days. And right now, she was holding his 4-year-old son in her lap while the boy screamed. But Min-ho wasn't screaming in silence like he always did. He was screaming with sound, real sound, sound that filled the room and echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. And his small hands were pressed hard against his ears, his eyes squeezed shut, tears streaming down his face as he experienced something he had never experienced before in his entire life. Sound. Dong Jun's chest tightened so hard he thought his heart might stop. He had spent 4 years fighting for this moment. He had flown in specialists from Seoul, from Berlin, from Los Angeles, from London. He had paid for experimental treatments that cost more than houses. He had begged doctors to try anything, everything, whatever it took. Every single one of them had told him the same thing. Your son will never heal. The nerve damage is permanent. There is no surgery, there is no treatment, there is no miracle. And yet here was his son, crying and overwhelmed, reacting to the sound of his own voice for the first time. Journey held the boy steady. Her arms were wrapped around him gently but firmly. Her voice was calm and soft as she whispered into his ear. It's okay, Min-ho. I know it's scary. I know it's loud. But you're safe. You're safe with me. Just breathe, just breathe. And somehow, impossibly, Min-ho began to calm down. His screams turned to whimpers. His hands slowly lowered from his ears. He looked up at Journey with wide, tear-filled eyes, and then he looked at his father. And Dong Jun saw something in his son's eyes that he had never seen before. Recognition, not of his face, but of his presence. His son had heard him enter the room. Min-ho, Dong Jun said, his voice barely a whisper. Before we continue with this story, I need you to do something for me. I pour my heart into these stories, and it genuinely hurts when people watch without subscribing. Please, just take 1 second and subscribe. It's free, and it means the world to me. Also, like the video and drop a comment telling me which city you are watching from. I want to know where all my amazing viewers are located. Please do well to subscribe now. Now, let's continue. The boy flinched at the sound. His eyes went wide. And then, slowly, he turned his head toward his father's voice. Dong Jun felt tears slide down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't care that his men were watching. He didn't care about anything except the miracle happening in front of him. His son could hear. His son could hear. But even as joy flooded through him, something else crept into his mind. Something darker. Something that had kept him alive in a world full of enemies for 15 years. Suspicion. He looked at Journey, really looked at her for the first time since she had started working in his home. She was 26 years old. She came from Baltimore. She had no medical degree, no special training, no extraordinary credentials. She was just a maid who was good with children. That's what her file said. So how did she do something that the best doctors in the world couldn't do? Dong Jun slowly rose to his feet. His legs were unsteady, but his voice was not. What did you do to my son? Journey looked up at him. There was no fear in her eyes, which surprised him. Most people were terrified of him. Most people couldn't even meet his gaze. But this woman looked at him calmly, almost gently, like she understood something he didn't. I didn't do anything to him, she said. I just noticed something the doctors missed. Explain. She took a breath. The specialists tested him for total nerve damage. They assumed his deafness was complete. But I noticed that he reacted to certain things. Vibrations, deep bass sounds, the rumble of the elevator, the hum of the air conditioning, things that most hearing tests don't measure. Dong Jun stared at her. So you're saying the doctors were wrong? I'm saying they didn't look hard enough. They saw the initial diagnosis and accepted it, but I've worked with deaf children before. I studied auditory development in college, and I've seen cases where residual hearing exists but goes undetected because nobody thinks to look for it. So what did you do? Journey hesitated for just a moment. I used music therapy techniques, low-frequency tones. I played them through a small speaker pressed against his chest so he could feel them in his body. Then I gradually increased the frequencies. It took weeks of careful work, and tonight something broke through. Dongjun looked at his son, who was now quietly resting against Journey's shoulder, exhausted from the sensory overload. The boy's eyes were half closed, but every few seconds he would twitch at a sound. The footsteps of the men behind Dongjun, the creak of the floorboards, the distant hum of traffic far below. Every sound was new, every sound was overwhelming, but every sound was real. Dongjun turned back to Journey. His instincts were screaming at him. Something about her story didn't add up. A community college education and daycare experience didn't explain how she had succeeded where world-class specialists had failed. There was more to this woman than she was telling him. And he was going to find out what. "Vincent," he said without turning around. One of the men in the doorway stepped forward. Vincent Park was Dongjun's right-hand man. He had been with the organization for 12 years, and there was nothing he couldn't find out about anyone. "Boss, I want a full background check on Miss Williams. Everything. Where she went to school, where she worked, who she knows, where she's been for the last 10 years. I want it by morning." "Understood." Journey's expression didn't change, but Dongjun noticed her hands tighten slightly around Minho. She was nervous. She was hiding something. Good, nervous people made mistakes, and whatever she was hiding, he would find it. But right now, in this moment, he couldn't bring himself to feel anything but gratitude. His son could hear. After 4 years of silence, his son could finally hear his father's voice. Dongjun knelt back down on the floor. He moved slowly, carefully, not wanting to startle Minho with sudden movements. When he was close enough, he reached out and gently touched his son's cheek. "Minho," he said softly, "can you hear me?" The boy's eyes opened. He looked at his father, confusion and wonder mixing on his small face. And then, slowly, he nodded. Dongjun closed his eyes and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 4 years. Dongjun stayed with his son for the next hour, sitting on the floor beside Journey as Minho slowly adjusted to the world of sound. Every few minutes, the boy would flinch or whimper as a new sound reached his ears. The clink of ice in a glass, the closing of a door, the low murmur of the men talking in the hallway. But each time, Journey was there to soothe him. She would whisper calming words, stroke his hair, help him understand that the sounds weren't dangerous. And Minho would relax against her, trusting her in a way that he had never trusted anyone except his father. It made Dongjun feel something complicated. Jealousy, maybe, or perhaps just sadness. For 4 years, he had been the only one Minho truly connected with. They had developed their own language of gestures and expressions, a private world where sound didn't matter. Now that world was changing, and Journey was the one leading his son into this new reality. Finally, Minho fell asleep from exhaustion. Dongjun carefully lifted him from Journey's lap and carried him to his bedroom, tucking him into bed with gentle hands that seemed impossible for a man of his reputation. When he returned to the living room, Journey was still sitting on the floor. She looked tired, but she didn't move. "You should get some rest," Dongjun said. "I'm fine." That wasn't a suggestion. She looked up at him. There was something defiant in her gaze. Something that reminded him of people who had survived things that should have broken them. "What's going to happen tomorrow?" she asked. "After your background check comes back." "That depends on what we find. And if you find something you don't like." Dongjun studied her for a long moment. "Then we'll have a conversation." Journey nodded slowly. She rose to her feet, straightening her uniform. "I should tell you something." "Go ahead." "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not here to steal from you or spy on you or whatever else you might be thinking. I took this job because I needed work and your household needed help. That's it." "Then you have nothing to worry about." She held his gaze for another moment, then looked away. "I hope that's true." She walked toward the staff quarters at the back of the penthouse. Dongjun watched her go, his mind racing with questions. Who was Journey Williams? What was she running from? And why did he feel like her arrival in his life was about to change everything? He picked up the abandoned glass of whiskey from the floor and took a long sip. The ice had completely melted, watering down the expensive bourbon. He didn't care. He walked to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline, the city lights glittering like a million stars. Somewhere out there, his enemies were plotting. His rivals were scheming. The FBI was probably building another case against him. The world outside this penthouse was dangerous and unforgiving. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, his son had heard his voice for the first time. And the woman who made it possible was sleeping just down the hall. Dongjun finished his drink and set the glass down. Tomorrow, Vincent would have answers. Tomorrow, he would know the truth about Journey Williams. But tonight, he would let himself feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. Morning came too quickly. Dongjun had barely slept. He kept going to Minho's room every few hours, watching his son sleep, listening to the boy breathe. Twice, Minho had woken up crying, overwhelmed by sounds that penetrated even his dreams. Both times, Journey had appeared from her quarters to help calm him down. She had a gift with the boy. There was no denying it. By 7 in the morning, Vincent arrived with a thick folder. Dongjun was sitting in his home office, a cup of black coffee in his hand, when his right-hand man walked in. Tell me, Dongjun said. Vincent sat down across from him and opened the folder. Journey Elise Williams, born in Baltimore, Maryland, 26 years old. Mother deceased, died when she was 15. Father unknown. Grew up in foster care until she aged out of the system at 18. Go on. She attended Baltimore City Community College, studied child development, worked at various daycares and private homes for the past 8 years. No criminal record, no debt, no flags. Dongjun raised an eyebrow. That's it, nothing else. Vincent hesitated. There's one thing. What? From 2019 to 2021, she was employed at Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Not as a nurse or a doctor, but as a research assistant in their audiology department. She worked under a Dr. Franklin Mayers on something called the Neural Auditory Restoration Project. Dongjun leaned forward. What was the project? Experimental treatments for hearing loss. Cutting-edge stuff. They were trying to develop a way to restore hearing in patients with nerve damage. The kind of damage that conventional medicine says is permanent. Dongjun felt a chill run down his spine. And what happened to this project? It was shut down in late 2021. Funding pulled. All research confiscated. No public explanation. What about Dr. Mayers? Vincent's expression darkened. Found dead in his home 2 weeks after the project was shut down. Official cause of death was suicide, but there were rumors. What kind of rumors? That it wasn't suicide. That he was killed because he refused to sell his research to a pharmaceutical company. That someone wanted what he had and was willing to kill for it. Dongjun sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Journey Williams wasn't just a maid who was good with children. She had worked on a project that dealt specifically with the kind of hearing loss his son had. And the man who led that project was dead under suspicious circumstances. Is she in danger? Dongjun asked. Possibly. If Mayers was killed for his research and she was his assistant, she might know things that certain people want kept quiet, or things they want for themselves. Find out who wanted Mayers' research. Find out who shut down the project. I want names. Understood. Vincent left, and Dongjun sat alone with his thoughts. He stared at the folder, at the photograph of Journey that was clipped to the first page. She was smiling in the picture, probably taken for some employment application. She looked younger, less guarded. What had happened to her between then and now? What had she seen? What did she know? He needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them. Dongjun found Journey in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for Minho. She had made scrambled eggs and toast, cut into small pieces. She looked up when he entered, her expression cautious. "We need to talk," he said. "About the background check. About Johns Hopkins." Her face went pale. She set down the spatula she was holding and wiped her hands on her apron. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." She was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed and leaned against the counter. "I was Dr. Franklin Mayer's research assistant for 2 years. He was brilliant. One of the most intelligent people I've ever met. He was working on a way to restore hearing in patients with severe auditory nerve damage. The kind of damage that doctors said was impossible to fix. Like my son." "Yes, like your son." "What happened?" Journey looked down at her hands. "We were close to a breakthrough. So close. Dr. Mayers had developed a technique using low-frequency sound therapy combined with targeted neural stimulation. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. We had test subjects who were showing real improvement." "So why was the project shut down?" "Because people with money got involved. A pharmaceutical company called Vance Pharmaceuticals. They wanted to buy the research. Not to help people, but to control it. To patent it. To charge millions of dollars for treatments that should be available to everyone." Dongjun's eyes narrowed, and Mayers refused to sell. He refused everything. He wouldn't take their money, wouldn't sign their contracts, wouldn't even meet with their executives. He said the research belonged to the world, not to corporations. And then he died. Journey's voice dropped to a whisper. 2 weeks after the project was shut down, they said it was suicide. They said he was depressed because his life's work was taken from him. But I knew Dr. Mayers. He wasn't suicidal. He was angry. He was fighting. He had plans to restart the research somewhere else, somewhere they couldn't touch him. "You think he was murdered?" "I know he was murdered. I just can't prove it." Dongjun studied her carefully. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "I did. They didn't believe me. No evidence of foul play, they said. Just a sad old man who couldn't handle losing his work." She laughed bitterly. "And then strange things started happening. My apartment was broken into, but nothing was stolen. Someone followed me home from work one night. I got phone calls at 3 in the morning with no one on the other end. I knew they were trying to scare me, so I ran." "You ran?" "I changed careers. Took jobs as a maid, a nanny, anything that didn't require a background check that would flag my connection to Johns Hopkins. I moved around. Different cities, different states. I've been running for 3 years." "Why did you take this job?" Journey met his eyes. "Because your son reminded me why I got into this work in the first place. When I saw him, when I saw how he struggled, when I saw the way he looked at the world with those sad, silent eyes, I couldn't help myself. I had to try." Dongjun was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since Vincent's report. Who was behind Vance Pharmaceuticals? Who wanted Mayers dead? Journey hesitated. "A man named Gregory Han, Korean-American, operates out of Los Angeles. He's the CEO of the parent company that owns Vance. He's connected to politicians, to law enforcement, to people at every level of power. He's untouchable." "No one is untouchable." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time. Dongjun saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. "You don't understand who you're dealing with," she said. "Gregory Han doesn't just run a pharmaceutical company. He's connected to things that would make even you uncomfortable. Illegal drug trials, black market medical technology. People have disappeared trying to expose him. Journalists, researchers, whistleblowers, they all vanish. I've dealt with dangerous men before. Not like him." Dongjun stepped closer to her. "Let me make something clear, Miss Williams. You saved my son. You gave him something that no amount of money could buy. Whatever debt I might owe you, I take that seriously. If this Gregory Han is a threat to you, then he's now a threat to me, and I don't tolerate threats." Journey shook her head. "You don't have to do that. You don't owe me anything. I'll leave if you want. I'll disappear again. I've done it before." "And what about Minho?" She stopped. Her eyes went to the doorway, where they could hear the soft sounds of the little boy waking up in his room. She had heard those sounds before anyone else because she had been listening for them. "He still needs help," she said quietly. "His hearing isn't fully restored. It's going to take months of therapy, maybe years, to help him adjust. If I leave now." "Then don't leave." She looked at him with surprise. Dongjun's expression was unreadable. "Stay, help my son, and let me handle Gregory Han." "Why would you do that for me?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked toward the doorway. But before he left, he paused and looked back at her. "Because some things are worth fighting for." And then he was gone, leaving Journey standing alone in the kitchen with her heart pounding and her mind racing. She had spent 3 years running from the shadows of her past. But maybe, just maybe, she had finally found someone who wasn't afraid of the dark. The days that followed were strange and tense. Dongjun had assigned 2 of his men to watch Journey at all times. They kept their distance, trying to be discreet, but she always knew they were there. Shadows in doorways, footsteps behind her in the hallways, eyes watching her every move. It should have made her uncomfortable, but instead, it made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. She focused on Minho. The boy was making remarkable progress. Every day, his brain was adapting to the new world of sound. He was learning to identify voices, to respond to his name, to understand simple words. It was exhausting work, both for him and for her, but every small victory felt like a miracle. Dongjun watched from a distance. He came home every evening, no matter how busy his day was, to spend time with his son. Journey noticed how different he was with Minho. The cold, calculating businessman disappeared, replaced by a patient, loving father who would sit on the floor for hours, helping his son practice new sounds. One evening, about a week after the night Minho first heard, Journey was sitting with the boy in the living room. They were playing a game where she would make sounds with different objects: a bell, a drum, a squeaky toy, and Minho would try to identify them with his eyes closed. Dongjun came in quietly and sat on the couch, watching them. Minho was so focused on the game that he didn't notice his father at first. When he finally heard Dongjun's footsteps, he turned around with a huge smile on his face. "Appa," he said, the word still clumsy and loud but unmistakably clear. Dongjun's breath caught in his throat. It was the first time his son had ever called him that. The first time he had ever heard his son say the Korean word for father. He dropped to his knees and pulled Minho into his arms, holding him tight. Over the boy's shoulder, his eyes met Journey's. There were tears in his eyes, tears he didn't bother to hide. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Journey nodded, her own eyes glistening. "He worked hard for this," she said. "He's a fighter just like his father." Later that night, after Minho was asleep, Dongjun found Journey on the balcony. She was standing at the railing, looking out at the city lights. The wind was cool, carrying the distant sounds of traffic and sirens. "You should get some rest," he said, walking up beside her. "I could say the same to you." He smiled slightly. "I don't sleep much." "Neither do I, not anymore." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 people with too many ghosts to find peace in the night. "Tell me more about Dr. Mayers," Dongjun said finally. "What was he like?" Journey's expression softened. "He was like a grandfather to me, the kindest man I ever knew. He took a chance on me when no one else would. I was just a kid from the foster system with a community college degree, and he saw something in me. He said I had the gift of observation, that I noticed things other people missed." He was right. She glanced at him. "Maybe, or maybe I just got lucky with your son." "It wasn't luck. You saw what experts couldn't see. You believed when everyone else had given up." Journey was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What happened to Minho's mother?" Dongjun's expression tightened. "She died giving birth to him." "I'm sorry." "Her name was Soo-yeon. We grew up together in Seoul. She was the only woman I ever loved." He paused. "When she died, I blamed myself. I blamed myself for bringing her into this life, for making her a target, for not being able to protect her." "How did she become a target?" "Complications during the birth. The doctors said it was a rare condition, something that couldn't have been predicted. But there were people who said it wasn't natural. People who suggested that someone had tampered with her medical care." Journey felt a chill run through her. Who would do that? "I had enemies even then. Men who wanted to weaken me by striking at my family. I investigated for years, but I never found proof." He looked out at the city. "And then Minho was born deaf, and the doctors told me it was because of the trauma of the birth. Another reminder of what I couldn't protect." "That's not your fault." I know, but knowing something and feeling it are different things. Journey understood. She had her own guilt, her own failures that haunted her in the dark hours of the night. Dr. Mayers used to say that guilt is just love with nowhere to go, she said softly. He said the only way to heal from it is to turn it into something productive, to use it as fuel to do better. Dongjun looked at her. In the moonlight, her features were soft, her eyes deep and thoughtful. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the flashy, artificial way that he was used to seeing in his world, but in a quieter, more genuine way. Is that what you do? He asked. Turn your guilt into fuel. I try. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. What are you guilty about? She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, I was there the night Dr. Mayers died, not at his house, but close. He had called me earlier that day, told me he had figured out a way to restart the research. He asked me to meet him the next morning to discuss it. What happened? I was scared. I had already been getting threats, already felt like I was being watched. I told him I would think about it. I went home and stayed up all night trying to decide what to do. Her voice trembled. By morning, he was dead. That's not your fault. I could have warned him. I could have told him to run. I could have done something. You didn't know what was going to happen. But I should have. I knew the danger. I knew what those people were capable of, and I was too scared to act. She wiped at her eyes. That's my guilt. That's what I carry every day. Dongjun reached out and placed his hand over hers on the railing. The gesture was gentle, almost hesitant, like he wasn't quite sure how to offer comfort. We all have things we carry, he said. The difference is whether we let them crush us or whether we use them to become stronger. Journey looked at their hands, at his fingers wrapped around hers. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with kindness, so long since she had let anyone get close. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared that they'll find me here. I'm scared that I'll bring trouble to you and your son. I'm scared that running is all I'll ever do. You're not running anymore. How do you know? Because you're still here. You could have left when I told you about the background check. You could have disappeared like you did before, but you stayed. I stayed for Minho. Dongjun's grip on her hand tightened slightly. Is that the only reason? Journey met his eyes. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. She knew what he was really asking. She knew what she should say, what the smart, safe answer would be. But she was tired of being smart, tired of being safe, tired of running from everything, including her own heart. No, she said quietly, it's not the only reason. Dongjun stepped closer. They were inches apart now, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, smell the subtle scent of his cologne. His eyes searched hers, looking for permission, for resistance, for anything that would tell him what to do next. And then his phone rang. The moment shattered. He pulled back, reaching for the device in his pocket. When he saw the caller ID, his expression darkened. What is it? Journey asked. Trouble. He answered the call, listened for a moment, then hung up without saying a word. When he turned back to Journey, the warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by cold steel. What happened? Someone came to the agency that placed you here, a man with a photograph. He was asking questions about where you went. Journey's blood turned to ice. They found me. Not yet, but they're looking. I have to leave. I have to go before they. You're not going anywhere. Dongjun's voice was firm, commanding. I told you if they're a threat to you, they're a threat to me, and I don't run from threats, I eliminate them. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Then help me understand. Help me fight them, because running hasn't worked for you so far, has it? Journey opened her mouth to argue, but the words died on her lips. He was right. 3 years of running and they had still found her. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to fight. The next morning, Dongjun made an announcement that shocked his entire organization. He gathered his senior lieutenants in the conference room of his Manhattan office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Wall Street. Vincent was there, along with 6 other men who controlled various aspects of the Kwon Syndicate's operations. The woman living in my penthouse is now under my direct protection, Dongjun said, his voice leaving no room for argument. 2 guards are assigned to her at all times. Any threat to her is a threat to me. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally." The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the lieutenants, an older man named Park Sung-ho, who had been with the organization since Dong-jun's father ran things, spoke up. "With respect, sir, who is this woman? Why is she so important?" "She saved my son's life." "Your son, Min-ho. The doctors said he would never hear. She proved them wrong. That's all you need to know." Park Sung-ho nodded slowly. "And these threats you mentioned, who are they?" "A man named Gregory Han. He operates out of Lowe's Angels. He runs a company called Vance Pharmaceuticals." Han, one of the younger lieutenants, a man named Kim Jae-hoon, leaned forward. "I've heard of him. He has ties to the West Coast families, serious connections." "Then you understand the stakes." "Sir, if I may," Kim Jae-hoon hesitated. "Going to war with Han over a maid seems unwise. He has resources, political protection, connections in law enforcement." Dong-jun's eyes went cold. "Did you just question my judgment?" "No, sir. I'm just trying to understand." "Let me make this simple for you." Dong-jun's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "My son spent 4 years in silence because every doctor in the world said there was no hope. This woman gave him hope. She gave him a future. If I have to burn down half the underworld to keep her safe, I will do it without hesitation. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now I want everything you can find on Gregory Han. His business, his associates, his weaknesses. I want to know what he eats for breakfast and where he sleeps at night. We're going to dismantle him piece by piece." The meeting ended, and the lieutenants filed out, murmuring among themselves. Vincent stayed behind, waiting until they were alone. "They think you've lost your mind," he said. "Let them think what they want. Have you lost your mind?" Dong-jun looked at his oldest friend. "Probably. Does it matter?" Vincent studied him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "No, I suppose it doesn't. What do you need me to do?" "Find out how they tracked her to the agency. Someone talked. I want to know who." "Consider it done." Back at the penthouse, Journey was struggling with her new reality. She was no longer a maid. The housekeeper duties had been assigned to other staff. Now, her only job was to help Min-ho with his therapy and to stay alive. The 2 guards assigned to her were professional and unobtrusive. They kept their distance, watching doorways and windows, escorting her whenever she left the penthouse. It felt like being in prison, except the prison had marble floors and a view of Central Park. Min-ho was the one thing that kept her grounded. The boy's progress continued to amaze her. Every day, he learned new words, new sounds, new ways of interacting with the world. His personality was emerging now that he could communicate, a mix of his father's intensity and something sweeter, more playful. He had started calling her Nuna, the Korean word for an older sister, and the first time he said it, she had burst into tears. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Dong-jun's announcement, Journey was sitting with Min-ho in the living room. They were practicing words again, going through flashcards with pictures and sounds. The boy was getting better at pronunciation, though some sounds were still difficult for him. "Dog," Journey said, holding up a card with a picture of a puppy. "Dog," Min-ho repeated, his pronunciation almost perfect. "Good job. What sound does a dog make?" "Woof woof." Journey laughed and clapped her hands. "That's right, you're so smart." Min-ho beamed with pride. Then he looked toward the doorway, his expression changing. "Appa." Journey turned to see Dong-jun standing in the entrance. He was dressed in a dark suit, as always, but there was something different about his expression, something softer. "Don't let me interrupt," he said, walking over to sit beside them on the floor. "We're practicing animal sounds," Journey explained. "Can I join?" Min-ho's eyes lit up. "Appa, play." For the next hour, the 3 of them sat on the floor together, going through flashcards and making silly animal sounds. Dong-jun made a terrible cow impression that sent Min-ho into fits of giggles. Journey couldn't help but laugh too, seeing this powerful, dangerous man mooing on the floor of his own penthouse. When they were done, Min-ho was tired. He crawled into his father's lap and closed his eyes, falling asleep almost instantly. Dong-jun held him gently, stroking his hair. "He loves you," he said quietly. I love him too. It's more than that. He trusts you. He feels safe with you. Journey looked at the sleeping boy. He's easy to love. You said that before. It's still true. Dongjun was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Vincent found out how they tracked you. Journey's heart sank. How? The employment agency keeps digital records. Someone hacked their system and searched for your name. It was a professional job, not something an amateur could do. So they knew I was using the agency to find work. They've probably been monitoring every major employment service in the country, waiting for your name to pop up. You were careful, but not careful enough. Journey felt sick. 3 years of running, of hiding, of changing jobs and cities and lives, and they had still found her. What do we do now? We go on the offensive. I've already started hitting Han's operations. Small strikes, nothing too dramatic, but enough to get his attention. And then what? And then we draw him out, make him make a mistake, and when he does, we destroy him. Journey shook her head. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, it's war, but I've fought wars before, and I always win. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this time would be different, that she wouldn't have to run anymore, that the shadows chasing her would finally be stopped. But she had seen what Gregory Han was capable of. She had seen the bodies, the disappearances, the destruction of everyone who had tried to stand against him. What if you can't beat him? She asked. What if he's too powerful? Dongjun looked at her, his dark eyes intense. Then I'll die trying, but I won't let him take you. I won't let him hurt my son. Whatever it takes, I'll stop him. Why? Why do you care so much about what happens to me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his sleeping son, at the peaceful expression on the boy's face. Because my son hears my voice now, he said finally. Because when I come home, he runs to me and calls me Appa. Because for the first time in 4 years, I have hope that his life will be more than silence and isolation. You gave me that. You gave him that. And I don't know how to repay a gift like that except by protecting the person who gave it. Journey felt tears prick at her eyes. That's not why I did it. I didn't do it for payment or protection or... I know, that's why it matters. They sat in silence for a long moment, the sleeping child between them, the weight of everything unsaid filling the air. And Journey realized, with a mixture of fear and wonder, that something had changed in her heart. Something she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. She was falling in love with this man. And she had no idea what to do about it. Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. The war with Gregory, Han escalated faster than anyone expected. It started with small skirmishes. Dongjun's men hit a distribution center in Queens that was connected to Han's pharmaceutical network. They seized computers, documents, and evidence of illegal drug trials that Han had been conducting on unsuspecting patients. Then they targeted a money laundering operation in Jersey City, a front company that Han used to funnel cash from his various illegal activities. The police were tipped off anonymously, and 8 of Han's associates were arrested. Next came an airfield in Connecticut, where Han's people were moving shipments of experimental drugs across state lines. Dongjun's team sabotaged the planes, destroyed the cargo, and disappeared before anyone could identify them. Each attack was surgical, precise, designed to hurt Han's operation without exposing Dongjun's involvement. But Han wasn't stupid. He knew who was coming after him. 3 weeks into the conflict, Dongjun received a message. It came in the form of a package delivered to his office in Manhattan. Inside was a photograph, a surveillance shot of Journey walking with Min-ho in Central Park, taken the day before. They were holding hands, the boy laughing at something she had said. A note was attached. She belongs to us. Return her or suffer consequences. Dongjun burned the note, but the message was clear. Han knew exactly where Journey was, and he was watching. That night, Dongjun increased security at the penthouse. More guards, more cameras, reinforced doors and windows. He moved Min-ho and Journey to an interior room with no exterior windows, a fortress within a fortress. Journey was terrified, but she refused to show it. She kept working with Min-ho, kept maintaining their routine, kept pretending that everything was normal. But nothing was normal, and they both knew it. "Tell me about Gregory Han," Dongjun said one evening. They were in his office, looking over files that Vincent had compiled. "Everything you know about him personally." Journey thought for a moment. "I only met him once, at a fundraiser Dr. Mayers took me to. He was charming, polished, the kind of man who makes everyone in the room feel like he's their best friend. But his eyes were dead, cold, like a shark. Dr. Mayers warned me to stay away from him. He said Han was the most dangerous man in any room because he made people forget that he was dangerous." Dongjun nodded slowly. "What does he really want?" "Control." Dr. Mayer's research wasn't just about restoring hearing. It was about neural manipulation. The techniques we developed could theoretically be used to influence brain function in other ways. Memory, cognition, maybe even behavior. Mind control. Nothing that dramatic, but the potential was there, and Han saw it. He wanted to weaponize the research, sell it to governments, to corporations, to anyone who would pay. And Dr. Mayers refused. He said the technology could help millions of people, but only if it was used responsibly. He wanted it to be open source, available to researchers everywhere. Han wanted it locked up, patented, controlled. So he killed him. Journey nodded. "And he's been looking for me ever since, because I'm the only one left who knows how the research works. The files were destroyed, the equipment was seized, but the knowledge is still in my head." Dongjun studied her. "Can you recreate it, the research?" "Maybe, with time and resources, but I won't. Not for him, not for anyone who would misuse it." "What if you recreated it for someone else? Someone who would use it properly?" Journey looked at him with surprise. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that Han isn't the only one with resources. There are legitimate research institutions, universities, organizations that would kill for what you know. What if we got you connected with them? What if you could continue Dr. Mayer's work, but safely?" I never thought about that." "Think about it now. Because if Han wants you for your knowledge, the best defense might be making that knowledge public. Share it with the world before he can control it." Journey was quiet for a long moment. It was a radical idea, completely different from everything she had been doing for 3 years. Instead of hiding, she would step into the light. Instead of running, she would fight back with the one weapon she had. Her mind. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But first, we have to survive." "We'll survive, I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But she had learned the hard way that promises were just words, and words couldn't stop bullets. The first major casualty came on a Thursday. Dongjun's warehouse in Brooklyn, a legitimate storage facility that also served as a front for moving goods, was attacked in the middle of the night. A team of armed men stormed the building, overwhelmed the guards, and killed 3 of Dongjun's men before setting the place on fire. By the time the police and fire department arrived, the building was destroyed and the attackers were gone. The message was clear. Han was done playing games. Dongjun responded with overwhelming force. Over the next 48 hours, he hit 6 of Han's operations across 3 states. A distribution center in Philadelphia, a nightclub in Atlantic City that served as a meeting point for Han's associates, a private estate in Long Island where Han's second-in-command was staying. The estate attack was the most dramatic. Dongjun's men went in hard and fast, neutralizing security and capturing Han's second-in-command, a man named Richard Cho. They extracted him to a location in Staten Island for questioning. Cho broke within hours. He gave up names, locations, schedules, everything Dongjun needed to continue dismantling Han's operation. But he also revealed something more disturbing. Han wasn't just after Journey for her knowledge. He was personally obsessed with her. "She humiliated him," Cho explained, his face bloody and swollen. "At that fundraiser 3 years ago, he tried to charm her and she shut him down in front of everyone, made him look like a fool. Gregory doesn't forget things like that. This isn't just business for him, it's personal." Dongjun felt a cold fury building in his chest. Han wasn't just a threat to Journey's life. He was a threat to everything. and personal vendettas made people irrational, unpredictable, dangerous. "What's his plan?" Dongjun demanded. "I don't know the details, but I know he wants her alive. He wants to break her, make her recreate the research, and then make her suffer for embarrassing him." Dongjun leaned close to Cho's face. "If anything happens to her, I will personally feed you to the Hudson River piece by piece. Do you understand?" Cho nodded frantically. Dongjun left Vincent to continue the interrogation and returned to Manhattan. He needed to see Journey. He needed to know she was safe. When he arrived at the penthouse, he found her in Minho's room, reading the boy a bedtime story. The scene was so peaceful, so normal, that it almost made him forget the war raging outside these walls. He stood in the doorway and watched them. Minho was snuggled against Journey's side, his eyes half closed as she read about a brave little rabbit who outsmarted a cunning fox. Her voice was soft and musical, bringing the story to life. When the story was done, Minho was asleep. Journey tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and quietly left the room. She stopped when she saw Dongjun in the doorway. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." She looked at his face, at the tension in his jaw and the darkness in his eyes. "What happened?" "We captured Han's second-in-command. He talked." "And?" "Han is obsessed with you. This isn't just about the research. It's about revenge, about control." Journey's face went pale. "What does that mean?" "It means we can't just wait for him to make a move. We have to end this, soon." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "How?" "I'm working on it, but I need you to trust me." "I do trust you." "Really, even knowing what I am, what I've done?" Journey met his eyes. "I know who you are, Dongjun. I've seen the news. I've heard the rumors. I know you're not a saint." "Far from it. But I've also seen you with your son. I've seen you be patient and kind and gentle. I've seen you put everything on the line to protect someone you barely know. That's not the behavior of a monster." "I've done monstrous things. Haven't we all, in one way or another?" Dongjun shook his head. "You're different, you're good." "I'm not good. I'm just trying to survive, same as you, same as everyone." He stepped closer to her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. "You're more than surviving, Journey. You're the best thing that's happened to my family in years. Minho adores you. He's happier than he's ever been. And I." He stopped, uncertain. "You what?" He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, tender. "I find myself thinking about you all the time, wondering if you're safe, wondering if you're happy, wanting to protect you from everything, even the things I can't protect you from." Journey's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Dongjun, I know it's complicated. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel." "And what do you feel?" His eyes searched hers. "Something I haven't felt since Suyeon died, something I thought I was incapable of feeling anymore." "What is it?" "Love." The word hung in the air between them. Journey felt like she couldn't breathe. This powerful, dangerous, complicated man was standing in front of her, opening his heart in a way she never expected. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything, just don't run, not from me, not from this." "I don't want to run, not anymore." He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite their strength. "Then stay. Whatever happens, stay with me." "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." And then he kissed her. It was a gentle kiss at first, tentative and questioning. But when she responded, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him closer, it deepened into something more. Something fierce and desperate and full of all the emotions they had been holding back. For a moment, the war outside didn't matter. The threats, the danger, the uncertainty, it all faded away. There was only this moment, this connection, this promise of something more. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "That was..." "Yeah." They laughed softly, foreheads pressed together, still holding each other. "What happens now?" Journey asked. "Now we fight, together." Together? And for the first time in 3 years, Journey believed that she might actually have a chance at happiness, a chance at a future. She just had to survive long enough to claim it. A week after that kiss, everything fell apart. It started with a routine errand. Journey needed new supplies for Minho's therapy sessions, specialized audio equipment that had to be picked up from a store in Soho. Normally, she would have ordered everything online, but the order had been delayed, and Minho was making such good progress that she didn't want to stop the momentum. She went with her 2 guards, staying close to them as they navigated the crowded streets. It was a sunny afternoon, and the city was bustling with tourists and shoppers. Everything seemed normal. But nothing was normal. The attack came quickly. A van pulled up beside them as they were leaving the store. The side door slid open, and men with guns spilled out. Before anyone could react, Journey's guards were down, tranquilizer darts in their necks. She tried to run, but strong arms grabbed her from behind. A cloth was pressed over her nose and mouth, sweet-smelling and suffocating. She struggled, kicked, screamed, but the drug was already taking effect. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was a man stepping out of the van. He was Asian, well-dressed, handsome in a cold, calculating way. Gregory Hand smiled at her. "Hello, Journey," he said. "We finally meet again." And then everything went black. Dongjun was in a meeting when Vincent burst through the door. "We have a problem." The words hit Dongjun like a physical blow. He was on his feet immediately, following Vincent to the security room where banks of monitors showed feeds from cameras all over the city. Vincent pulled up footage from Soho. The attack was captured on a street camera. Journey struggling, being dragged into a van, the vehicle speeding away. When? 20 minutes ago. Status of the guards. Alive but unconscious. Tranquilizer darts. They won't remember anything useful. Dongjun felt a roar of rage building in his chest, but he pushed it down. Rage wouldn't help now. He needed to think. How did they know where she would be? The store order. Someone in the organization knew she was going there today. A traitor. Has to be. The order was only placed 2 days ago. Very few people knew about it. Dongjun's mind raced through possibilities. Who had access to that information? Who could have passed it to Han? And then it hit him. "Stephen Cho," he said. Vincent looked surprised. "The accountant. He's been with us for 8 years. Pull his file, check his communications, check everything." It didn't take long. Within an hour, they had proof. Stephen Cho had been receiving payments from a shell company connected to Gregory Han. He had been feeding information for months, waiting for the right opportunity. Dongjun felt betrayed and furious and sick all at once. He had trusted Stephen, had known his family, had been to his home for dinner. When Stephen was brought before him, the man was shaking with fear. "Please," he begged. "I didn't have a choice. Han threatened my daughters. He said he would hurt them if I didn't cooperate. So you sold us out." "I had no choice." Dongjun stared at him with cold eyes. "There's always a choice." "Please, my daughters are innocent. Whatever you do to me, don't hurt them." Dongjun was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Where did they take her?" "I don't know. I swear I don't know. I was just supposed to report her location. That's all." "Who's your contact with Han?" Stephen gave a name, an address, everything he knew about the operation. Dongjun listened in silence. When Stephen was done, he made a decision that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. "Get him out of here, him and his family. I want them on a plane to Korea tonight. If I ever see his face again, I'll kill him, but not today." Vincent looked shocked. "Boss, he betrayed us because Han threatened his children. I can't condemn a man for protecting his family, but he's dead to us now. Get him out of my sight." As Stephen was dragged away, sobbing with relief, Dongjun turned back to the monitors. Han had Journey. Every minute counted. "Track that van," he ordered. "Find every camera, every toll booth, every traffic light between Soho and wherever they're going. I want a location within the hour." "And then what?" Dongjun's eyes were hard as steel. "And then I'm going to get her back, and I'm going to kill everyone who took her." Please do well to subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video, comment where you're watching from as well. Thank you. The trail led to Long Island City. Dongjun's team tracked the van through a maze of security cameras, toll booths, and traffic lights. It ended at an abandoned warehouse near the waterfront, a massive brick building that had once been a factory. Intelligence suggested that Han was using the location as a temporary holding site before moving Journey to a more secure facility. They had a narrow window. Dongjun assembled a team of his best men. Vincent would lead the assault. Dongjun himself would go in directly, despite everyone's objections. "It's too dangerous," Vincent argued. "If something happens to you." "If something happens to me, you take over the organization. But I'm not sending other men to rescue the woman I love while I sit back and watch." Vincent had no response to that. The assault was planned for midnight. Dongjun's team would approach from 3 directions, cutting off all exits. Vincent would disable any vehicles on site, and Dongjun would lead the direct assault on the main building. At 11:55 p.m., they moved into position. At midnight, they attacked. The initial breach was brutal and efficient. Dongjun's men came through the windows and doors simultaneously, overwhelming Han's guards before they could organize a defense. Gunfire echoed through the building. Bodies fell. Dongjun moved through the chaos with lethal focus. Every enemy who crossed his path was dealt with quickly and permanently. He wasn't thinking about mercy. He wasn't thinking about consequences. He was only thinking about one thing: Journey. He found her in a back room on the 2nd floor. She was tied to a chair, gagged, her face bruised from where someone had hit her. Her eyes went wide when she saw him burst through the door. But she wasn't alone. Gregory Han stood behind her, a gun pressed to her temple. "Stop right there," Han said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. Dongjun froze, his own weapon raised. "Let her go." "Or what? You'll shoot me. You might hit her." "I won't miss." "Maybe, but are you willing to take that chance?" Dongjun's mind raced. Han was using Journey as a shield. There was no clean shot, no way to guarantee her safety. "What do you want?" Dongjun asked, buying time. "What I've always wanted. The woman, her knowledge, everything that Dr. Mayers discovered. She doesn't know how to recreate the research. It's gone." Han laughed. "We both know that's not true. She worked with Mayers for 2 years. She knows more than she's letting on, and I have ways of making people talk. Touch her again, and I'll burn down everything you've ever built. You're welcome to try, but right now, I'm the one holding all the cards." The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Dongjun kept his weapon trained on Han, looking for an opening. Behind him, he could hear his men finishing off the last of Han's guards. And then Journey did something unexpected. She bit down on the gag in her mouth, and with a sudden violent motion, slammed her head backward into Han's face. Han staggered, his grip loosening for just a moment. It was enough. Dongjun fired. The bullet hit Han in the shoulder, spinning him around and causing him to drop his gun. Dongjun was on him in an instant, tackling him to the ground and pinning him with brutal force. "You should have stayed in Lowe's Angels," Dongjun said, pressing his gun against Han's forehead. Han looked up at him with hatred in his eyes. "You think this is over? You think killing me solves anything? There are others. This is bigger than me. Then I'll kill them too, one by one, until there's no one left who threatens what's mine." Han opened his mouth to respond, but Dongjun didn't give him the chance. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the building, and then there was silence. Dongjun stood slowly, the weight of what he had done settling on his shoulders. He turned to Journey, who was watching him with wide eyes. He quickly untied her restraints and removed the gag. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I'm okay, a little bruised, but okay." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have protected you better." "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." "I killed him, Han. It was the only way." Journey pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "I know, I saw." Does that change how you feel about me?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached up and touched his face. "You saved my life. You came for me. That's what matters." "I'll always come for you." She kissed him gently, and he held her like he would never let go again. 6 months later. The penthouse was filled with sunlight. Spring had come to Manhattan, bringing blue skies and warm breezes that swept through the city like a blessing. Journey stood on the balcony, looking out at the skyline she had grown to love. So much had changed since that terrible night at the warehouse. So much had healed. Gregory Hand's empire had crumbled after his death. The evidence that Dong Jun's team had gathered, combined with testimony from his former lieutenants, was enough to bring down the entire network. Vance Pharmaceuticals was dissolved. Several executives were arrested. The FBI, which had been investigating Han for years without success, was grateful enough to look the other way when it came to certain irregularities in Dong Jun's own business dealings. It wasn't a perfect ending. The world didn't suddenly become safe or fair, but the immediate threat was gone, and that was enough. Dong Jun had made changes to his organization. He stepped back from the more violent aspects of the business, delegating to trusted lieutenants while focusing more on legitimate ventures, real estate, finance, international trade. The Kwon Syndicate was still powerful, but its power was increasingly built on legal foundations. He said it was for Minho, for the future, but Journey knew it was also for her. The boy himself was thriving. His hearing continued to improve, and he was now attending a specialized school for children with auditory processing differences. He had made friends. He was learning Korean and English simultaneously. He was happy. And he still called Journey Iyama, mother. The first time he had said it, weeks ago, Dong Jun had looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Do you mind," he asked, "if he calls you that?" Journey had shaken her head, unable to speak through her own tears. "No, I don't mind." Dong Jun had taken her hands in his. "He loves you, I love you, and if you'll have us, I want to make this family official." He had gotten down on one knee, there in the living room where everything had begun. Minho had come running in from his bedroom, holding a small velvet box that was almost too big for his hands. "Marry us, Iyama," he said, giggling. Journey had laughed through her tears and said yes. Now, standing on the balcony, she twisted the engagement ring on her finger and smiled. The wedding was planned for next month. Nothing too elaborate, just close friends and family at a beautiful venue in the Hudson Valley. Dr. Franklin Mayers would have been proud, she thought. His research hadn't been lost after all. Journey had been accepted into Columbia University's audiology program, where she was working with leading experts to publish and open-source the techniques he had developed. Soon, children like Minho around the world would have access to treatments that could change their lives. It wasn't vengeance for her mentor's death. It was something better. It was legacy. "What are you thinking about?" She turned to find Dong Jun walking onto the balcony, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He was dressed casually, in jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "Everything," she said, accepting one of the cups. "How much has changed, how lucky we are." "Lucky," he smiled slightly. "I think we earned this." "Maybe, but we're still lucky." He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. No argument there. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up below them. In the distance, they could hear Minho's voice, chattering to his nanny about something he had seen on television. The sound of his voice, strong and clear and full of life, was still a miracle that neither of them took for granted. "I got a call from Vincent this morning," Dong Jun said. "Anything important?" "Just checking in, making sure the wedding plans are on track." Vincent is checking on wedding plans. The same Vincent who once told me that emotional attachments were a liability. Dong Jun laughed. "He's coming around, slowly." "He'd better. He's your best man." "He knows. He's actually excited about it, I think, though he'd never admit it." Journey smiled and rested her head against Dong Jun's shoulder. This was her life now. This family, this love, this future she had never dared to imagine. "Do you ever think about the past?" she asked. "About everything that happened?" "Sometimes, but not as much as I used to." He kissed the top of her head. "The past is done. What matters is what's ahead." "And what's ahead?" "Our wedding. Minho's 5th birthday next month. Your graduation from Columbia in 2 years. A lifetime of moments like this." "That sounds perfect." "It won't always be perfect. There will be challenges, problems, maybe even dangers." "I know. but we'll face them together. She looked up at him, at the man who had once been just her employer, then her protector, then her love. Together. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Behind them, they heard the patter of small feet. Minho came running onto the balcony, his face split into a huge smile. Appa, Iyama, look. He was holding a drawing he had made, a crayon picture of 3 figures standing on a building with the city below them. There were labels above each figure, written in shaky but determined letters. Appa, Iyama, Minho. At the bottom of the picture, in letters that were bigger and more carefully drawn, was a single word. Family. Dongjun scooped his son up in his arms, and Journey wrapped her arms around both of them. They stood there, the 3 of them, on the balcony of their home, looking out at the city and the future. The boy, who was never supposed to hear, was laughing at the sound of the wind. The woman who had spent years running had finally found home. And the man who had given up on love had found it again, in the most unexpected place. Some miracles couldn't be explained. But this one had been earned. Thank you for watching to the end. Please remember to click the subscribe button and make sure you like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thank you.